I want to start off with really kind of setting out the scene. If I've got the right button, which is maybe now. So this is a career path really for fashion, and I know a lot of you might be doing sort of like different art subjects, but when I kind of first started my career path, I did an art foundation. So I didn't do anything at school, I left school, I didn't know what to do, and I kind of got pushed into doing an art foundation because I knew how to draw, but I never did drawing at school or art at school. And so going into art foundation, you kind of got to learn everything a little bit. And I quite like doing ceramics, so I used to make shirts out of clay. And my teacher at ceramics has said to me, you should do fashion design. And also I used to do drawing. I used to do lots of drawings and illustrations. I used to try to make leather watercolours so it looked like leather. And my drawing teachers would say to me, you should do fashion design. So I changed my career path from the Art Foundation and did a HND in fashion, where I learned how to cut patterns. And so when you're kind of doing fashion design, I think there's a few maybe smaller circles that could be in here, which might be pattern cutting or illustrating. And you know, the same again with the kind of the larger circles here. But this is basically what the career paths of the fashion looks like. So the next thing I wanted to speak to you about was brands. So I thought we'd do a little competition. We've got some very nice perfume we're going to give away for everyone that can answer correctly. So, and hands up. I don't want people shouting out, you've got to put your hands up. So we'll start off with a really, really easy one. Who's this lady here?
Coco Chanel.
Who said that?
Oh, I did.
Fantastic. Hope you guys a winner. There you go.
Oh, thank you. Oh, I'm going to smell so good tonight.
Okay.
Oh,
Right.
I didn't bring any musk with me tonight.
Now, next one, we'll try this guy on the bottom left. That one. Oh my God, this is too easy, isn't it? I should have picked harder.
Who was it?
We need no one in the front row anymore. I need people in the back. This guy here. I'm not picking you. Go on, this guy here. Someone at the back.
Gucci.
Eh?
Gucci.
It's not Gucci.
Even though it's not advertising.
No, you're not allowed to speak out. Can I have someone at the back? Yves Saint Laurent, okay, well done. There you go. Right. And then I thought I was trying to be a little bit tricky and I'll do someone slightly harder. This guy, no one in the front by the way.
No.
This guy here. Anyone in the back here? Huh? Huh? Anyone else? Well done, who was that?
Oh, okay.
Huh?
Sorry, it's a big photo. Who is it?
Alexander McQueen.
Yeah, what's that?
You said Steve. I'm thinking Steve.
No,
Steve
sorry.
actor.
No, Alexander McQueen. Yeah, he does lots of stuff.
Now, what I want to illustrate about this is, all these people here have built their own brands, and they've all kind of come from different sorts of places to be able to build a brand. I think, you know, with Coco Chanel, she started off as a dressmaker, and she built an enormous company. With Yves Saint Laurent, I think he was a bit more highbrow in the way that he got into it. Alexander McQueen, you know, is a kind of a normal lad from London. Dad was a taxi driver, and he started studying tailoring in Savile Row, and that's how he got into it. With Ralph, he'd kind of come from a very commercial background, where he was working with the department stores in New York on just developing a tie line, which became successful, and he built his brand on sort of like padding out the product line in Ralph Lauren. So they all became quite icons, and the next slide is going to kind of show you how that then translates into just being a brand. So you can see here, we've gone from a person really down just to an icon. And I think that's what the essence of a brand is, where it becomes recognisable from the simplest of symbols. And then the next slide, what I wanted to show you was all of these icons we can put down to one word. So, there you go. So if we think about Coco Chanel, we would say chic. If we thought about Alexander McQueen, we would say edgy. If we thought about Ralph Lauren, we would say heritage. And if we thought about Yves Saint Laurent, we'd say sexy. You know? So all of these people, they can kind of like, they had their own narrative, and that's what brings me back to sort of the storyline of it. What's so important about having a narrative? And I think everyone that's done the presentation today has kind of had that element in it. It's about having your own narrative, and that's what makes you actually stand out. Okay, so this is my fashion journey. So I'd done Art Foundation at Rochdale College of Art, which I loved. It was really, really fantastic. And I'd been kind of pushed to do a degree. And so I'd made an application to Kingston to do a BA in fashion design, which I was accepted. And it was maybe 1984. And there was definitely a renaissance that was happening in fashion in London. And I got a Saturday job working at the House of Beauty and Culture as Richard Torrey's assistant. This is Richard Torrey's work here. He used to do lots of knitwear. And they kind of come from a quite kind of post-punk background. And there was lots of people that were involved in House of Beauty and Culture. And we were kind of the darlings of the press and the alternative avant-garde of London fashion at the time. This was work by John Moore, the shoe designer, and he'd do a collaboration as well, when no one did collaborations. And this was with Dent's gloves, when Dent's gloves were still made from beautiful kid leather in a small factory in North London. My experience of working at House of Beauty and Culture was kind of like the first sort of introduction to the real world of fashion. I think my experience previously being round about the Manchester area, it was exciting and things were happening in fashion, but really to move down to London and be involved in this ambient college kind of took it to the next sort of level. And then this is a little, really difficult to find stuff about this time. And it's a Super 8 video, and I remember the day when we filmed this, but it's quite interesting to watch. This is Dave Baby, he's an artist, and he does carvings out of wood.
It's fine.
Edgy.
And lots of demons. The other people that were involved in the House of Beauty and Culture, John Moore died quite early in his career, so didn't really leave that catalogue of work. The other person that maybe some of you know would be Judy Blame. He worked with a lot of people, and later on in his career he worked a lot with Louis Vuitton. And then Christopher Nemeth, who married a lady from Tokyo and moved to Tokyo and set up his own sort of studio there. And again, later on worked with Louis Vuitton. But we actually made things there. So we made shoes. I used to do a line of leather hats, and I'd also make all Richard Torrey's leather bags. The clothes that were made there were Christopher Nemeth or Richard Torrey, and it was about building skills, using quality fabrics, and doing something which was original. Judy Blame would do things like find things on the street, plastic things, things that he dragged out the Thames, and make these amazing pieces of jewellery out of it. So they were like sort of, you know, avant-garde, objet d'art. And then there were two guys that made furniture there called Frick and Frack, which would find salvage wood and make furniture out of salvage wood. But the level was really high fashion. So it was using material but in a different way. Quite interesting to see. It's really a moment in time. You know, people wouldn't kind of film in this way because it's so naive and all Super 8. Now, kind of one thing always leads to another. So I was working at the House of Beauty and Culture as Richard Torrey's assistant, and Richard Torrey was financially supported by Hannah and Mori. Hannah and Mori was the first Japanese couturier, so she'd been very active in fashion since the 1950s, and she was the first sort of fashion designer in Tokyo to design, I suppose, Western clothes, but definitely with a Japanese influence. And I was lucky enough where I was invited out to Japan while I was still at college, in my second year, to work on the collection in Tokyo with Hannah Mori. So again, it was a massive kind of influence in my life that I got to spend some time in Japan. Now, it's somewhere where I've always gone back to. So I've been to Japan many, many times, but that first time that I went, it's like you never saw any Westerners. People used to run down the street and touch my hair. I used to have hair then. And you know, you were in a place which was so isolated for such a long amount of time, but they were embracing this sort of Western culture. So Western culture there was kind of more than what it was anywhere else. It was, you know, to go shopping there, and you went to designer shops that have the full collection. Where you go and look at designer collections, maybe in London, they wouldn't, you know. So it was a place which was really exciting at the time that I was there, and definitely a very big influence in my later on in my fashion career and the things that I did. At the same sort of time, it was 1988. And if anyone knows what happened in 1988, I can't remember. But I was working with Damski. These were the hats that I was making. And Adam, I'd met in a club. And the next week, he was on the front cover of the Face wearing my hat. So it's kind of like all of a sudden there was this media explosion, and there was lots of things and opportunities happening. He signed a record contract. His first single that kind of was the first sort of, what do you call it, acid house sort of track that was released by a major record label, which was Energy. And then he followed it up with Killer with Seal. And, you know, that became kind of the #1 single of the year. So I was doing all their stage stuff and kind of going on tour with them for the rest of that year. But London was getting to be a bit kind of like, I wanted to maybe go and do something else. And so I'd gone back home to Manchester just for a weekend. And I had a friend who wanted to introduce me to a few guys. And so I went for a meeting. They said, we want to start a streetwear brand. And they didn't actually say streetwear brand because they didn't know what a streetwear brand was. But what they actually said was, we want to have something which is competition against a brand which you might know was called Joe Bloggs, which wasn't really streetwear, it was just kind of nothingness, you know, it didn't really have its own sort of style, but young people were wearing it. So we started the brand Gio Goy, and again, it kind of exploded from a small warehouse on Dolphin Street in Ardwick in Manchester, in the basement, with a few cardboard boxes with t-shirts in, to being a global brand where we would have television crews from Japan and Germany turn up on a doorstep at 9 o'clock in the morning on a Monday and come and film us, wanting to know sort of what we were doing. And that gets back to sort of how I started, where it was about having a narrative, and where you've got authenticity in your narrative, then people really do buy into that. So we started working with lots of different bands. Manchester was a hotbed, I suppose, for music at the time. So we were dressing from, you know, the Smiths, New Order, Stone Roses, all of those sort of bands that were all happening at that sort of time in Manchester. Oasis hadn't happened at that time. This is a little bit later. Rihanna, she came and did a pop video in the UK. You know, we did her. What's his name? Libertines?
Oh.
Yeah, everyone knows this girl. And we got kind of a lots of press again. This was ID magazine. ID magazine at the time, I suppose, was like, it was like the Quran, you know, it's like the thing that you went to try and find the truth, where in fashion, they were the one that really had the voice. Gio Goy was like walking around with hand grenades in your pockets and you've just got to pull the pins out. It was going to self-explode. And after maybe 3 years, I'd been approached by some other guys who said to me, we want to start a brand. And they were going to kind of offer me a much better facility to be able to do that. And so I started a brand called Hooch. And this was, I think with Gio Goy, I used to do a lot of travelling. So I'd do all the manufacturing. I'd be in Portugal on Monday, Italy on Wednesday, and maybe fly to, I don't know, Pakistan or something on Friday. And I'd do this constant sort of thing when I was travelling for a few years and coming back and you know, developing the collection. With Hooch, we had a stronger manufacturing base and we started opening up China. And China was the time where it was just starting to happen. So we first started working in Hong Kong, and in Hong Kong they said to us, don't go to Guangzhou, they'll cheat you. So the next morning, we got the train to Guangzhou, and we got better prices. And we worked in Guangzhou for maybe 6 months, and then they said to us, don't go to Shanghai, they'll cheat you. Mm-hmm. So the next morning, we went to the airport, and we got a flight to Shanghai. And we started working all the way through the Yangtze Delta. We ended up opening up 2 factories in the Yangtze Delta, and we had our own offices in Shanghai with 50 staff, merchandisers. And we built this company to about £20 million, I think. And then we sold it to a venture capital company. Some of the big wins that we had was, who's that?
Yeah.
Who's that?
Gallagher Brothers.
No one front line. Who said that?
We told you to be quiet.
Huh? Anyone?
No One Direction.
It's One Direction.
Oh, thanks.
So that was our really big win, because, you know, he wore a jacket for the first video and they exploded. So for that first 6 months, we just got an enormous amount of press. It was quite easy then for us to sort of open up doors and, you know, and develop a collection. But we had a problem with Hooch, because we'd been trading for about 12 months, and then Hooper's Hooch, which was an Alco pop, started selling on the marketplace. And their lawyers came to see us, they sat us down, they said, we were aware of you, but you know, our lead time on developing that brand was maybe about 12 months. So where we knew that you were actually in existence, we just thought you were this little t-shirt brand from Manchester and, you know, it was going to go away. But within that 12 months, we grew so much that they had to sit us down and say, okay, here's the checkbook, how much do we write it for, can we have the name? So we let them write the cheque and we rebranded to Bench. And then that brand kind of got bigger than this brand. I think this was the most successful piece that we did. So this jacket sold more than 1 million pieces. And it was kind of a funny story because I've been to New York and I used to buy vintage clothes in the thrift stores in the kind of not so fancy areas of New York and Brooklyn. And I'd found a little ski jacket, which was this ski jacket, and I'd found a kind of an Eskimo coat in maybe seal leather or something, which had the hood and the pom-poms, and then brought it back to Manchester and merged them together, and it was kind of an instant success. Later on, when I wasn't living in the UK and I'd kind of come back, I was shocked to see 4 o'clock, you know, girls leaving school, where it was kind of like the uniform. It was every single girl walking out the door at school was wearing the same jacket. But again, I kind of got bored with that. So I took a year off and started travelling. And I was kind of just travelling, not really working, and I got approached by some guys that had the brand Religion. And they said to me, will you come and be our creative director and redevelop the brand? And they were based in Bali in Indonesia. And I'd never been to Bali before. I wanted to go. So I started, I think it was April 2000. I moved to Bali to develop the first collection. And my calendar would be, I'd be in Bali for about 2 months, develop a collection, and then I would do all the trade shows. So we'd do London, Paris, New York, LA, Las Vegas, which was the biggest one. It was called the Magic Show, but there was no magic there, just trade, you know, garments. And then Tokyo, and then back to the UK. And it was the first time where I could really do things which were handmade, back from the days when we were at the House of Beauty and Culture. Because those times where I was working with Hooch, Bench, and even Georgoy, there was kind of some restrictions on what you could do, actually hand things. But working in Indonesia, you had all these amazing people that have got skills. It's like they make wicker baskets, and you know, for anyone that's been there, you'll kind of understand that there's a very, very strong culture and the way that people work with their hands. So to be able to translate that into garments, you can see on these examples here, there's an enormous amount of handwork, but this is actually just a t-shirt. So the essence of that kind of streetwear was still there, but we were able to do things that were very much embellished. While I was at Religion, they wanted to develop another brand, so we developed Buddhist Punk. And again, very similar thing. It's actually the first collection was just the leftovers from the collection that we designed for Religion. At the time, I suppose I was quite prolific in what I was doing, and I definitely had a problem on being able to focus at one thing. It's kind of like it was a shiny thing, and you kind of run off and get somewhere else with what you were trying to, you know, inspiration on design. So with Buddhist Punk, we were able to do things that are a little bit more, you know, different inspirations. And from that, we got the license deal for the Rolling Stones. We also did a license deal for Disney when we were there. And I think that those sort of brands were really having problems on selling their product, but they liked what we were doing on applications. So by taking those iconic symbols and being able to do them in applications, and it kind of worked, but it was for a time period. And I think then it kind of went out of fashion, and it didn't really sell anymore. So I don't even know whether Buddhist Punk is still around anymore, but Religion still is. At that point, I still wanted to do my own thing. Going back to my hats were called Fugazi. When I was younger, I was fascinated by the Vietnam War, and so the word Fugazi had kind of come from that. And then Gio Goi was Vietnamese. It meant, where is the call? It was two words that were stuck together. And then also hooch had kind of come from that influence of American GIs in Vietnam. So there's this kind of, thread that have kind of gone through all of my work. Only when I'm looking back at it do I realise all that. So kind of getting this slide thing together over the last few days, I'm thinking, oh my God, there's these little elements that kind of join things. You join the dots backwards, I suppose. But with Bernard Violet, it was my mum and dad's name. My dad's called Bernard, and my mum's called Violet. And so we've developed this collection, again, very similar to what I've been doing with religion, and similar to what we did with Buddhist punk, but with more sort of streetwear influences. So these are the cameras from CCTVs, and we worked on things which were, like New York sort of hip-hoppy inspiration, those sort of things. I also had the opportunity, again, working in Bali, because they've got great skills. So we did a collection in golds with precious stones for Bernard Violet, and then other opportunities kind of came around. So Fashion TV asked me to do the catwalk show, and this was the kind of the stills on the backstage from the catwalk show. Unfortunately, I don't have any video of it. It was a time kind of before all that was happening, and I just never catalogued anything. And then these are some of the kind of wins that we had as well. I wasn't living in the UK, so for a lot of it, I didn't even know about them. I've got no idea who JLS is, but apparently they were in the X Factor, and they wore Bernard Violet. Some of the big wins that we did have, that I did know about, because I was spending a lot of time in New York at the time, was Linkin Park. So they wore it for Numb. Pharrell and Jay-Z, I dressed all the girls for the front in, which was again a really kind of big video. I was quite famous in Japan when I was younger. Got no idea who this guy is, but apparently he is. And then Vogue kind of wrote about us as well. But again, trying to find all those bits and pieces online these days, it's kind of maybe they're not there. Now, 2009 was a difficult, I'll go back to 2003. 2003 was a very good year, that was the slide before. 2009 was a very difficult year. We knew what happened kind of with the global markets, and so I had my own brand, which I was financing by myself, and people just didn't pay me. So I had to make a career change. So I went from being an owner of a brand and my own boss to actually taking a job. And I worked for this company, which was based in Jakarta, in Indonesia, and they had about 1 million square feet of retail space throughout the archipelago. So they'd have 500 shops and be in department stores. They had 3 brands, menswear, women's wear, and I was the brand consultant, creative director for kind of everything that they were doing. I'd have a very big team of people that worked with me, so designers, graphic designers, pattern cutters, merchandisers, and you'd have to kind of collate all these different collections together with doing marketing, photo shoots, what the store's going to look like, projections, working with the brand manager, understanding what your targets were on what you'd sell and how many months it'd take to do it and what the lead time on manufacturing. So you'd understand kind of the A to Z of fashion. And I think to get to that point, I had to go through everything that I'd done before that. So probably at this point, I'd worked for, 18 years, nearly 20 years, to understand how to do it from A to B. But again, it was very challenging. But it was great because I could stop work at 5 o'clock, other than the traffic in Jakarta. But you know, it was a happy time. My children were young, and I could spend time with them, and I got a lot of support on what I was doing. This is how we'd start developing. We'd develop from mood boards, and then from that there's a kind of a process. Indonesian Fashion Chamber, they approached us and asked if we would do a collaboration fashion show with them. With Burn and Violet, I used to do lots of fashion shows. I'd do fashion shows in nightclubs, I'd do fashion shows wherever, and we'd kind of just put things on. A lot of the times we wouldn't use models, we would use breakdancers, or, you know, kind of just people with personalities. We'd use skateboarders with skateboard ramps and BMX riders and just anything that was kind of different. But I love doing fashion shows, and I love the idea of the fashion show as being theatre. And this goes back to sort of when I was at college at Kingston. I used to go to Paris to watch the fashion shows. And seeing those fashion shows when I was quite early on in my career, you kind of realise that, you know, we sell, back to the first sort of side, we sell a brand, and it's not so much about a product, it's about really what the brand identity is. And so to do a fashion show, you've got all of those elements that come in, like choreography, the way that, you know, you style the clothes, the music that you use, the visuals that you use behind it. So this was a fashion show that I did in 2014 in Jakarta. Okay, so it was kind of, you know, I mean, it was fun doing it. We based it all on the macabre and kind of Edwardian sideshow sort of things. Normally with the fashion show, things are a crazy, crazy deadline. So we had to get all that together in about 3 or 4 weeks. But, you know, when the opportunity arrives, you do it and you kind of put the hours in to kind of make it happen. Some of the other things which I've done kind of since then. So I left Jakarta and moved back to Bali. I was missing Bali at that time. Jakarta's a difficult city, 25 million people. You know, it's like one big long traffic jam. So I moved back to Bali and I developed Doubleware, which was an old brand. It was based in Boston, Massachusetts, started in 1918 and kind of gone bankrupt, I suppose, back in the 50s. So we'd re-erected the brand. And this was really interesting because I got a really kind of love as well of all this sort of heritage and understanding how to make denim product and that skills as well. So we sourced in fabrics from Karuki in Japan, all salvage, made on the old you know, the thin sort of weaving things, and we developed this brand. And then again, always learning new skills. So, I've got a lot of shoes. I love shoes, and we did Thomas, Dutton and Thorogood. So this was the first running shoe. I mean, can you imagine running in them with spikes? But I found a factory that did Goodyear welting using Cordova leathers from Spain, and we developed a shoe collection. And these are the illustrations for, so this is how it starts, illustration, and then it goes into sort of product. Again, every sort of kind of thing that I've done, I've always tried to learn about what the essence is on how to manufacture it, and those skills you kind of build as you go along. Some of the things that I still do now, I kind of guess you all know, or anyone under a certain age will know Weekend Defender, so I still do some manufacturing for them. And then it comes on to my latest thing. We've just launched this. This is iEnvy. It's a curated premier activewear for ladies, voila. And also we have the perfume. These are the hundreds. And we've got a little 10 that you throw in your gym bag. And so I've given out a few of the samples. If you'd like to scan our QR code and follow us on social media, and that's it, thank you very much.